In the weather today, the winter solstice was just hours ago, 10:30 p.m. Eastern last night, so it is officially winter today. And we head into the holidays, everybody celebrating something, Festivus, Christmas Eve, Christmas, Boxing Day, and even Armed Forces Day of Vietnam, which is today. The world's hotspot over the past 24 hours, well, we throw it back to South Africa, AWIPS Falls, in the northwest part of the country, 114 degrees. And we can see that that is a campsite with rapids and cliffs, and we'll take a quick look from Google Street View. And that's what the surrounding terrain looks like, a little bit like Nevada. And I'm going to guess one of these is AWIPS Falls, or at least maybe all of them are. And the world's cold spot, Greenland, once again, minus 66 up there on the Greenland ice cap. Let's take a closer look at that. Summit Camp is a U.S. National Science Foundation facility located at an elevation of 10,500 feet, the highest point on the Greenland ice shelf. Very much a mini Antarctica in our own backyard. Current surface map shows most of the country is still in between weather systems. Pretty quiet in the eastern U.S. under the influence of ridging, the central U.S. under southerly flow, and that tends to be warm. And since some of that is crossing cooler air, which is residual from the last outbreak, it is lifting isentropically over that air mass. So we're getting some stratiform clouds and even some fog in parts of the Midwest. And our next weather change coming in from the west, a California weather system starting in around Arizona, some storms being reported from the northern Gulf of California up into the Imperial Valley. I think that's the Imperial Valley around the Salton Sea. And we've got another Gulf of Alaska air mass making inroads into the northwestern states. Let's do a top-down view of the atmosphere. Now, this is a chart that I've never shown. I don't think too many YouTube channels have ever shown anything like this. This is 1 millibar. 1 millibar, not 10, not 100, but 1 millibar. So this is up at 45 kilometers near the top of the stratosphere, up near the mesosphere. So this is usually where we look for the first signs of sudden stratospheric warming. Nothing like that today. In fact, this is a rather typical pattern. Low pressure off the chart around Svalbard and Iceland, and ridging across the Aleutians. And that gives us a flow from the northwestern gateway into the U.S. And you can see winds out over the Atlantic, 200 knots. Of course, there's not much density at that altitude, so that air does not exert very much force. So anyway, that's 1 millibar. We can drop down to 10 millibars. This goes down to about 30 kilometers, about 100,000 feet, pretty much the same pattern. And then we drop down to 100 millibars. This is in the base of the stratosphere. Sometimes forecasters will use this chart. This is good for looking at the generalized planetary circulation. And you can pick out the long waves pretty easily with this chart. So this is painting out a possible long wave on the East Coast, one out in the Central Pacific, and ridging in Western Canada, kind of split into two different streams. And then we get down to a more familiar level. This is 300 millibars at jet stream level, the top of the troposphere. And you can see that the waves get a little bit more wavy. So more small-scale disturbances start to emerge. And that's a trend we see as we go lower and lower in the troposphere. Breaks up into smaller and smaller scale systems. So that long wave trough off the west coast right there, long wave trough out here, and broken up into a couple of smaller waves in those regions. And then there's that ridging being broken down by this migratory trough through British Columbia. And we start to see a cutoff low in Southern California. And that's going to have an effect on the central U.S. as we go into Christmas Eve. So in more practical terms, what does this mean for the forecast? Well, looking at this chart, we've got a split flow pattern. There's the northern stream way up there in Canada, and we got a southern stream across Mexico into the Gulf. And in between, a couple of cutoff lows and highs. So this is kind of a very weak Rex block. I don't think that's big enough to actually affect the flow upstream very much. However, that's what it's going to look like. If that amplified even more, that would probably set up some blocking. All right. Other than that, we can go ahead and go to the 500 millibar chart and look at the dynamics. And this is what we're looking at for this evening. There's that cutoff low wandering across the Imperial Desert into the Yuma area. Trough in the northwestern U.S. that's generating quite a field of lift out there in the interior of Washington. Not much going on elsewhere. Troughing across the Midwest. Kind of a weak field of upper-level lift across Illinois and Wisconsin, and elsewhere just ridging. There's some there in Colorado and ridging in Ontario and New York. And there's your Q vector field this evening. Strong lift in Arizona, strong lift in eastern Washington up into British Columbia, and some weaker lift across Illinois. And here's this other little area around Rapid City up to Mobridge. Another area of lift in the Snake River Valley and northern Nevada, probably associated with that front pulling out of the Cascades. And now we have a better picture of the processes taking place across the U.S. So there's our area of lift in Arizona and into the Imperial Valley. We've got that lift out there behind this front, and that's probably acting a little bit like an antifront. That's a term you can look up in search engines and pull up a little bit more info. And looks like that does extend along the front. And our other area of lift right there in Illinois. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather in the northeastern U.S. Well, the big thing that we see here is the ridging across the eastern U.S., so not much low-level cloud across New York and Pennsylvania. But as we go to the west, there's that approaching wave, and we do know that there is some ascent associated with that, and quite a bit of tropical moisture. As we can see on that precipitable water chart, we're looking at values of about 1 inch in Illinois, which is pretty unusual for this time of year. Looking at about 3/4 of an inch all the way up to Lake Michigan. So it doesn't take much to get a large area of clouds and precipitation this time of year. In the southeastern U.S., fair weather, but quite a bit of mid and upper level cloud. We've got that southern stream system we talked about in the Gulf of Mexico. And rain is on the way for Florida. The Weather Prediction Center calling for a slight risk of excessive rainfall Monday out there in the Florida Panhandle and adjoining areas of the south. And that rain will spread up the coast for Tuesday. There could be 2-inch amounts early next week and maybe 1 to 2 inches up into the Carolinas. In the south-central U.S., we've seen a band of clouds go across Texas. That brought some rain to parts of the state. What we're left with now is a mixture of stratocumulus, altocumulus, just low and mid-cloud forms, and that's within that plume of higher precipitable water. In fact, let's compare that to that chart. And you can see the axis of that moisture from about Houston through Little Rock and on up towards Chicago. And that's about where that cloud field is. Houston, Little Rock, and Chicago. Some downslope flow across the higher plains, but as you can see out to the west, another system on the way. Before we look at that, we'll take a quick check up north. I don't know if we have any viewers. I know we've got a couple around the Grand Forks area. But yeah, the northern plains, it has been warm. Highs in the 50s as far north as Des Moines, as far north as Sioux Falls, and even up towards Glasgow. And we're looking at 60s today as far north as North Platte. There is some snow on the ground in North Dakota, but we're looking at some much warmer weather over the next few days as we clear out this stratus, and we're going to get that warm air advection really start to filter in over the weekend. But there will be a big change coming up from the west. We're looking at snow possibly into Nebraska for Christmas Eve and Christmas. In the southwestern U.S., a big Pacific system making its way inland. The main upper-level lows we've mentioned out around the Los Angeles-San Diego area. Somehow I've added radar. Yeah, we'll look at that. Lots of rain spreading into Tucson and Phoenix and Blythe and into the deserts, and a couple bands up near Las Vegas and Barstow. So a lot of areas are going to get precip, and as that works into the Continental Divide area, the Four Corners, we're going to be seeing those winter storm warnings go up. Winter storm warnings are in effect already for the mountains, basically this area here, northern New Mexico, and the mountains of south-central Colorado. Some areas can get as much as 12 to 18 inches over the weekend. However, the snow levels will be rather high. We're looking at mostly 7,500 to 8,000 and above. So Albuquerque, Santa Fe will not be getting snow. They may get some melted snow, but no significant accumulations in the valley floors. And there's a look at it on the surface chart. A couple of winter storm warnings in Arizona. Mostly above 8,000 feet, could be 7 inches of snow in those areas, and on the highest peaks, they could see up to 2 feet of snow. There is a lot of moisture. You can see the dew points up in the 50s out there around Phoenix and Tucson. Easterly winds flowing into that low-pressure area, and we've got a severe warning around the Yuma area. Yuma reporting thunderstorms at this hour. There's the radar presentation showing a bow echo moving out of the deserts into the eastern side of Yuma. That's the apex, and that's where we're going to see most of the high winds. However, they did drop the severe warning as we set up this clip. The severe warning, however, let's take a quick look at that. They were looking for gusts up to 60 miles an hour. So for whatever reason, they decided to let that go. So unfortunately, the bow echo is perpendicular to the radar, so we can't really evaluate the winds very well from this angle. But just taking a quick look, the magnitude's not really all that great, but that does look like a little bow right there. So I might have some concern for areas right out ahead of that part of the line. Then looking further west into the Los Angeles area, things are improving, starting to get on the backside of that system. However, flood watches extend as far west as Malibu and the San Fernando Valley. High surf will continue to impact the Southern California coast all the way through early next week. Then moving up north, we've got our new front coming out of the Gulf of Alaska region into the northwestern U.S. That'll produce some changes in the northern Rockies. We'll take a look at that shortly. Then heading up into Alaska, weather going downhill once again. A low pressure area in the Aleutians starting to affect the southern coastal regions. Let's take a look at that on the GFS charts. Starting out this evening, low pressure well to the south, couple bands of snow in southern Alaska. And then we see this atmospheric river, the strong onshore gradient affecting southern Alaska. And as we go into the remainder of the weekend, you can see that shifts into southeastern Alaska as well. Very tight gradient through that area. So we've got winter storm watches in effect once again for the Haines-Skagway area, and the Canadian Weather Service has extended that up into Haines Junction and Carcross. Those areas could get up to 10 inches of snow. Also, blizzard warnings in effect for the Bristol Inlet area of southwestern Alaska, and gale warnings through the Valdez Bay area and Cook Inlet around Anchorage for tonight. Winds picking up to 40 knots tonight with 10-foot seas. And we'll see another atmospheric river heading into southeastern Alaska for Sunday, and then a rather substantial one on Christmas into British Columbia and the northwestern U.S. So stay tuned for that. Let's take a look at Canada. A little Hudson Bay system affecting parts of Nunavut. Other than that, not very much going on in Canada. A Canadian prairie system in Alberta bringing up some warm air, downslope conditions, and 50s into southwestern Saskatchewan. And out there on the east coast, major weather systems starting to clear Newfoundland. They've had winter storm warnings across the entire island and very high winds. Those will persist into tomorrow, looking for an additional 4 to 8 inches of snow and winds up to 60 miles an hour along the coasts. All right, let's look at that forecast here in the U.S. And our charts are very detailed. You've got precipitation, you've got clouds, you've got thickness, winds, everything's on there. So you can focus in on your favorite area and follow along. If you're in Chicago, there's that rainy area in that warm advection zone. Remember, there is that plume of high precipitable water. And if you're in Arizona, we've got that other frontal system moving through the state, and you can see overnight that's going to cross into the Four Corners area. By tomorrow morning, moving through New Mexico, and in Colorado, we've got bands of snow breaking out. Again, most of those will be above 7,500 to 8,000 feet. Then for tomorrow, warm advection really pulls in across Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and we've got showers developing all the way from Houston, San Antonio, up to Wichita Falls, Wichita itself, and all the way into South Dakota. Pretty weird seeing rain in South Dakota in December, but there it is. But cold air is flowing on the backside. That's going to be the cold air starting to get dislodged, moving into Denver for late Saturday, and starting to move into Utah and Nevada as well. Then going into Sunday, Christmas Eve, lots of cold air on the move through the high plains, through Nebraska, and we're going to see that snow breaking out. Rapid City to Pierre and down to Binkelman, Akron, and North Platte. Convective bands developing from San Antonio, Dallas, up to Tulsa, Kansas City. Could be some thunderstorms embedded in that. And that gradually shifts eastward during the day on Sunday into Louisiana, Arkansas, and Missouri. Cold air continues to move south. There it is, cold air advection, and that's being driven by a rather modest 1030 millibar low. Typically this time of year, we want to see 1040, 1050. So 1030 is not really all that strong, so that's going to just gently push the air south. Then we go into Christmas, and that's what it looks like on Christmas morning. The only places getting snow, Nebraska and maybe around Salina, Concordia, Kansas, and that's about it. Maybe around Lake Superior. Everybody else getting mud, rain, and gloomy weather, all from Atlanta, Jacksonville up to St. Louis, Minneapolis, even getting rain. So not very Christmassy. All right. So then going into late Christmas, that rain moving up into the Great Lakes area and into the eastern U.S. region, downslope flow through Kansas and Texas, so that'll make things a little bit more mild on the backside, but still cold core low right there. And you're going to see, as we go into Tuesday and Wednesday, that cold core low favoring a little bit of snow shower activity in Missouri as we get a new round of cold air advection surging south. Well, that will do it for this edition. Time to get this rendered and uploaded. Hope you found it interesting and educational. If you have ideas, comments, suggestions, please leave a YouTube comment and I'll check that out. Well, we do have Christmas coming up Monday, and I'll try to come back and do our Monday supporter show later in the day. If not then on Tuesday. And if you're in the gift-giving spirit, feel free to pick up a copy of one of my books, Weather Map Handbook, Weather Analysis and Forecasting, or one of my software titles like Digital Atmosphere. You can get those at weathergraphics.com, and it helps this program out directly. Those items ship from right here. And of course, it's a gift of knowledge to you as well. Alternatively, you can become a Patreon supporter, and there's the link for that. So maybe one of those options will work for you. I hope you have a great rest of your evening and some fun-filled holidays coming up. Take care, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.